So with that, starting with the dairy operation questionnaire, so this flows right, it's attached right to your VS1. So for all of the operations, you'll answer the first question. Did you milk any does during the previous 12 months? If they say no, you'll skip to the final section, which is the office use only section, and complete that. If they say yes, we milked a couple does, then you'll follow up with question 2, which is how many total dairy goats, whether dry or in milk, were present on September 1, 2019. If it's less than 5, you won't complete this questionnaire and you'll go to the office use section. So only operations that have 5 or more milking does that they've milked in the previous year will complete this portion of the questionnaire. So we start once again with our basic inventory. There should be no blank responses for the number of head for any question. Record 0 for any categories for which the producer did not have any of the animals present. So that'll be for 2 through 9. When we get to 10, the question is the milk produced on your operation weighed? And then the options are daily, monthly, less frequently than monthly, and never. There is no weekly option. So check monthly, leave us a little note. We caught that at a later date. And unfortunately, given how the process works here, we can't make changes at a later date. So if you could just check monthly and we'll be sure to validate that, I would greatly appreciate it. So then moving on, and the dairy sections are pretty short, so we'll move through these pretty quickly. Section I is on general management of the dairy goat operation. One other thing I want to clarify, when we're talking about dairy here, we're talking about dairy goats only. If they have cows present on the operation that they milk as well, exclude those practices and procedures and focus on what they do with their dairy goats that they milk. So section I, general management. I6 is the maximum length of lactation. So we want to know how long have they milked one doe. It may be greater than 365 days. So an example of this, what if the longest lactating doe started her lactation in March of 2018 and she finished on October 15th of 2019? Include the length of her lactation period even if it is greater than the 365 days, as long as it has been completed by the date of the interview. Another question in section I, so we ask about organic dairy milk. This is referring to the goat's milk. So they may produce both organic goat milk and cow milk. We just want to know about the goat milk. So moving on to section J, kidding management. This is a bit more of an abbreviated section since we already captured a lot of information regarding their kidding practices. A few things to note here. There we are. J4 is the kid feeding protocol. So we want to know how they're feeding their kids the first 4 weeks of life. If they're left with the dam for all 4 of those weeks, you'll just check the left with the dam. Let's say they're left with the dam the first week and then they feed them 8 ounces 5 times a day. So you'll for the second week put 8 and then put the frequency as well. And this refers to both goat milk and any milk replacer products they may be receiving. So what if kids typically nursed over a month and then were hand fed? Check left with the dam for each of the 4 weeks.
Question.
Yes.
Being silly. So for every goat operation I visit, then I say, well, you don't have dairy goats, they have 0. You want us to fill out the first page of this? Even if they have 0.
So just mark those first 2 questions. That way we know they did not qualify for the questionnaire.
You want us to send in the first and the last page?
It's all attached to the VS questionnaire. So when you get it, it's all as one. So you'll just send back the whole questionnaire and you'll just fill out D101 and D102 so we know they didn't qualify for it, and that's it. But yeah, it's all attached as one, so you won't. The agritourism is separate, so that'll be a little different. But yeah, this one, send it all in. So section K is milk marketing. Once again, useful definitions for you are found on section 4, page 80. K3, A through E is a little more complicated, so we're going to walk through this one. This is about goat milk and milk and products sold. So generally, any product leaving the operation permanently should be considered yes for this question, whether it's sold, traded, or given away. So it includes all three of those categories. So first you'll ask if they sold, traded, or gave away any milk or cheese or other milk products. If they say yes to either of those, you'll move down and answer A through E. So we want to know were the products sold, traded, or given away directly to the public. This would include internet sales and farmers markets, to retail establishments, restaurants, or other commercial sales. It could be to a co-op or part of a co-op, or to a wholesaler, dealer, or processor, or if they're doing something else that we haven't captured, write it in there. And then K4E, we asked them if they're getting any premium for their goat milk products. We got some feedback from California, thank you. And they thought that alpha casein might be an answer that pops up there. So just to let you all know, that could be something that would be counted in the other specify for that question. And then once again, we have question 5 is asking about on-farm pasteurization. And then question 6 is asking about the sale of raw milk products intended for human consumption. So we understand that in some states this is illegal to do. Still capture this information and it will be aggregated into regional estimates. So we won't report illegal practices in a specific state. And we'll skip this scenario for now and move on to milking procedures. So the first 3 are pretty straightforward. Just note that you check one only. So we want to know the primary methods for each of those, or what they usually do. L5 is asking about the use of disposable gloves. So what if some of the folks use them and others don't? We want to know what's usually done. So if some use them, some don't, mark sometimes. And then let's see if there's any other key ones in there. Moving on to L8, force stripping. So just as a reminder, a quick definition of force stripping: pulling 2 to 3 streams of foremilk from each quarter of the half of the udder in this case, stimulating milk letdown and removing residual bacteria. And then I have a what if for L6. So L6 is how frequently are milkers trained on milking procedures. So what exactly do we define as training? That could be hands-on training, it could be a video, it could be, hey, you shadow me for a day and learn more about how this is being done. So how they train could differ based on the operation. And then the what if for L8, which is the force stripping question. What if they usually force strip, but every now and then they don't because of time constraints? Enter the code that best corresponds with the operation's usual practice. So if they usually do it at each milking, then you would put 1. And then the rest of these are check one only. So just make sure that when you go through 10 through 14, you read the question exactly as it's written to the producer and make sure that you're only checking one of these. If for some reason they have an odd practice that does kind of overlap with 2 of them, write it in other and we'll reclassify them afterwards if needed. So any questions on those sections before we jump into section N? Yes.
So in section K, it asks animal products sold, traded, or given away. And then question 6 asks, do you market any raw products? Is that including trading and giving away, or is that just some?
We would include those that are traded and given away as well. Yeah. Yeah, so any products that were consumed, intended for human consumption, are fixed on that one. Good. Any other questions, guys? Okay. I know we're going a little faster, so stop me at any point if you have questions. We're here to make sure that you guys understand this before you have to go out and train your field. So section M is on milk quality. M2, so the first one is, did you routinely perform somatic cell count testing on the milk from your herd? If no, you'll skip to question 3. If yes, we want to know what was the herd average somatic cell count for the milk tested in the previous 12 months. Let's see if we have notes on that. I don't think we do. Just to note that threshold for acceptable somatic cell count in goats is less than 1.5 million cells per mil. M8 is the next tricky one that we'll move to. So during the previous 12 months, what type of does were typically selected for milk culturing? So we have fresh does, and those are does that have kidded in the past 2 weeks. And then something that might end up in MAF would be, M8E, high somatic cell count does. Those could also be does referred to as having subclinical mastitis. So something to keep in mind as you work with the producers. And once again, just as a reminder, we want to focus on what they're doing for their goats on their operation. So if they have cows, make sure that they're focusing on what they do with their goats that they're milking. And then M10 is organisms identified in milk culture. So select don't know, or 2 here in this list. If the producer doesn't know, was unable to locate records, or the culture methods used would be unexpected to yield isolates of the specific organism. So some labs may not include culturing for one or more of the organisms listed. If they were not tested for it, it cannot be said that it wasn't present in the milk, so mark don't know. If it was tested and it was negative, then you would mark no. Any questions on milk quality section? I do want to point out one more thing. I don't have a note here for it, but there is a scenario that walks you through 12 and 13 on what we consider for a mastitis treatment protocol. So question 12 is divided into 2 categories. We have the treatments and then the management. Make sure you answer yes and no for each of those. And if they do use intramammary antibiotics, we want to know the number of does treated. And that time frame refers to the previous 12 months. Any questions?
Is it number of does or number of treatments?
Number of does.
So if they treated a doe multiple times, we only count it once.
Yes. Yep, we want to know number of does treated. However, if we look at, of the does treated, so if we look at question 14, of the does treated during the previous 12 months with IMM antibiotics for mastitis, what percentage were given the following antibiotics and what withdrawal time was used for each? So that can be greater than or equal to 100% if they use more than one product. So if she had multiple cases of mastitis and she was treated with a different product, you would count her in the respective groups. And then we'd like to know what withdrawal time they used, so capture that information as well. So N is dry doe procedures. So we want to know how they're drying off their does, if it's based on a schedule, milk production level, presence of mastitis or somatic cell count, or other reason. And we want to know the percentage of does that are dried off by that reason. If they dry them all off on a set schedule, then you would just put 100% in A. And then that follows up with during the previous 12 months, what percentage of does were dried off using the following methods. Then we have a yes, no. That's pretty straightforward. Moving on to N7. So this is similar to the one I just talked about, but now we're talking about intramammary antibiotics used for dry does. So you're going to capture the ones that were treated with intermammary antibiotics for mastitis on question M14. And you're going to capture the ones treated as dry does with intermammary antibiotics on N7. So make sure that you're not double counting those in one location or the other. And with that, we reached the office use only section, which we went over earlier. So we'll move on to the agritourism questionnaire real quick and then jump into our guest speakers. And like I said, if you guys have any questions as you work through those scenarios, or even if you go out and you administer one questionnaire and you have a few questions for us, email us at that point in time too, and we can always address any concerns that you have. So the agritourism questionnaire, everyone have a copy of that as well? So you'll ask them the first two questions on this page too. Kath, do we want them to, even if an operation doesn't qualify for the agritourism question, they don't need to send this back, do they? No. So with this one, Lynn, if you answer no to the first two questions, don't bother sending it back. We'll classify them as not applicable or declined.
Yeah, well, you won't really know though, you might think I forgot.
Right.
So that's why I still get it.
Can we capture it in like if she sends you a message, then can we put it in Tableau?
Yeah, we can put it in Tableau whether or not they didn't apply. I mean, we were just gonna count. So right now, the way I have it set up in Tableau is the declined not applicables are all under one. But if you wanna let me know, yeah, this operation declined or this one isn't applicable, then we can separate those in Tableau as well. We just didn't wanna make it more work on your guys' part.
So now, the very last page of the agritourism questionnaire does allow you to say that the problem.
There you go. So we can do it the same and just have you send the office use
Yeah,
page.
I would like to do that. Yeah, I think actually that might be better.
Yes.
So it does-
Yeah,
Perfect.
Why don't you just staple like the other one, unless you don't want to waste paper for the.
Just staple them all.
Staple everything together.
We're going to send you less agritourism questionnaires because we feel like there's going to be fewer numbers of them. And so we have fewer of them printed. But I like the idea of sending the office use only page, and you can make copies of that to send to us.
So you don't even want the first two questions?
If they didn't qualify or they didn't want to participate, then no, just send this page. Sound good?
So maybe what we'll do is we'll send more copies of that page. I mean, we didn't want to print out all the tourism questionnaires because we don't expect it any more than that to include the other thing altogether. And that would list a lot of people.
Yeah.
So we will just print the last page.
Yeah, or, I mean, we can print it for you guys and send a handful of them, or just make copies, and either or is fine. Let us know. So, the agritourism questionnaire will be administered on operations with one or more goats that have allowed agritourism in the last 12 months. So, our two screener questions for this is, during the previous 12 months, were members of the general public invited onto the farm other than to the home? And I have a definition of what we're referring to when we say general public. Let me get to my notes on my slide with that. So, oh, it should be here. So the general public or visitors refers to anyone outside of the producer's friends, families, veterinarians, officials, inspectors, or employees. It includes individual visitors or organized groups. It could be a 4-H, a school field trip, a birthday party, whether or not admission is charged. So that's our definition of general public. The next screener question as to whether or not they should complete the questionnaire is, did the public have access to areas or facilities on the farm that house or contain animals, feed, manure, or farm equipment? So if they didn't have access to any of those areas, they didn't have access to the animals, then you would say no, and you would not complete this questionnaire. So a few more things on this slide. Once again, the purpose of this questionnaire is to better understand the extent of agritourism here in the U.S. and learn more about the procedures and precautions that producers should take if they're participating in agritourism. And then as we move forward, another definition that is important, goat visitor area, represents any area where animals are available for public visitation. So what if a goat producer hosts a birthday party for their grandchild and grandchildren's friends? Where does that fall? So if they were brought on and they set up, like, let's say a petting zoo where they could go pet the animals, that would count, and we would want to know more about that. So moving on to the question, this one does not have sections, it's just all one questionnaire, so I've broken them down by items. So item 2, on the first page again, public access. So what if the operation sells products and visitors only have access to the store, but the animals have fence line contact with areas where the general public has access? You would select yes and continue. Other questions will likely not apply based on the degree of the visitor access to the operation, and so when not applicable, write NA. Item 3 is the number of visitors, visitor days per month, and average number of visitors per month. So from September through August, we want to capture the number of days people visited and then the average number of visitors during that month. So what if the farm sells eggs in all months of the year except the winter? Visitors buy eggs and can pet goats through the fence. Typically 4 groups stop by each weekend, and there are 1 to 2 people per car. So for December, January, and February, you'd record 0 in column 1, and then it'd be NA for column 2. And then for the non-winter months, we'll record 8 days because that's the approximate weekend days per month in column 1, and number of for the number of days, and then 6 people, 4 groups, half with 1 person, half with 2 people, let's say, in column 2 for an average number of visitors per month. So you'll have to work with the producer to break down exactly how many visitors they have and just get an average of that. And then if we go to the next few questions are just where is the parking, is that parking area downhill from any animal facilities, about if it's shared fence line where they could have contact with the goats before having to go through a specific area. So a lot of this was developed in conjunction with Valerie and about what we talked about yesterday. So I think some of this is review. So let's go to M9 or 9. So during the previous 12 months, what goat types and other animals were available for public visitation? For available animals, were visitors allowed to touch the animals, and were visitors allowed in the pen? So if you say yes, an animal was available for public visitation, then you need to answer the next 2 columns. The what if here, what if a llama is kept with the goats, but the llama never comes close enough for people to touch it? People are allowed in the pens with the goats where the llama is located. So for example, in F, we would write other animal species, and you'd specify llama. It would be yes, it's available for public visitation. No for column 2 because they can't ever touch it. And then visitors are allowed in the pen, so yes there. Transition areas. So Valerie I thought she did a great job of breaking this down for you guys yesterday. So 12 is the transition area marked by signage visible and easily understood by visitors, including what is expected from them in the animal area. So we have this card for you to show them that explains the transition area. Question?
Hey, you asked about rabies for the dogs and.
Yes.
I guess we asked about rabies earlier, right? For the goats.
Yes, in the vaccines we did. Yep. So that was part of the vaccine table. Here we're just wondering if we can go to that one, if dogs and cats are present, and if so, are they vaccinated against rabies? So there may be your neighbor's dog that comes down and is present on the operation. You might not know if it's been vaccinated or not, so then you'd put a DK for that. Any question on the transition areas? Okay. Item 15 is the direction of the flow through the visitor area. So you're going to check one only. We want to know if it's one direction flow, so they just go directly through the barn or follow a path and it only goes one way. Or a controlled movement, they can go both ways, but it's directed. Or it's a free-for-all and they can just wander about the operation as they choose. That would be visitors move freely through the areas with no restrictions. Now the other option of that is visitors are escorted through the goat raising area, and we ask that in question 13. So if they're escorted, then we don't ask about the flow because we know that there's someone with them at all times, making sure that they go through in the order that has been set up. Then we go to item 18, which is visitors feeding the goats. So what if visitors are not allowed to feed the goats, but sometimes pull grass to feed them through the fence? So you would select no because the visitors are instructed not to feed the goats. We can't control everything that someone does, but we want to know what are the general practices and procedures on this agritourism operation and their policies that they have in place. So you would mark no on that one. And that goes for 16 and 17 also when we talk about policies and warnings given. We can't guarantee that everyone are following the policies and warnings given, but we want to know if the operation has something in place and if they're communicating those either with signage or verbally communicating them. Then we ask a few more questions about if they're allowed to feed goats, and then we get into hand washing. So item 23 I want to talk about for a minute. So on average, how frequently, and you can choose in times per day, per week, or per month, depending on the operation, when visitors are present, are the hand washing stations checked for availability of items such as water, soap, and paper towel? What if the operation only checks once a day when they have visitors on the weekend? So answer once a day, since we're looking for the frequency of supplies checked on visitor days. Oh, let's go back. We'll stand here. A couple more questions to clarify for the agritourism. So if you look at question 34, in the event of an abortion in the goat visitor area, would you leave goats in the visitor area? And if they answer yes, then you have to do the 2 follow-up questions. So are visitors prevented from contacting the aborted goats? Is there a barrier such as glass to prevent shared airspace with aborting goats? Or if they remove the aborting doe from the goat visitor area, is contaminated bedding also removed? So just as a reminder to make sure you follow up with those if yeses.
Pick your own placenta.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Sorry.
And then I just want to draw your guys' attention to the last question in the agritourism questionnaire, because you may wonder why we're asking this. And we put it last because it may be a little more of a touchy question. Have you met with an insurance agent about protecting your farm through policies for an agritourism operation? And if yes, have you added policies specific to public visitation on your farm? So as we talked about a little bit yesterday, they are at risk if someone were to get sick or something were to happen on their operation. And right now it seems like there's not a ton of policies out there that these operations can have if something through their insurance. So we just want to get a better idea of what is out there and what insurance companies can do to support them.
So the question on this, might touch on this in the what if section. A few facilities, I don't know if they've been selected, probably not, for this survey, do contracted goat cuddling and or yoga events off-site. Is there any nod to those type of?
Cap in here, these are on the operation. Yes. Are you good with that? We're only referring to agritourism on the operation. So yeah, they may take the goats somewhere else, but we couldn't include all of it. Yeah, they may take them to a petting zoo too. I think that's kind of common, but yeah, this is agritourism on the operation.
Because like the goat yoga thing, like every week they go into farmers markets and all over, and to me I find it kind of horrifying, scary, but everybody's into it. It's viral in our area, literally probably viral, but just curious on that.
Yeah, it's big out here as well. Yes.
Kind of on that same note, are any of these operations going to be like zoos that have?
They shouldn't be. So our selection is goat producers with 5 or more goats. So you shouldn't have, I mean, they may contract and send, like she was saying, some of their goats to a zoo for petting zoo purposes, but don't count that,
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe it'll come up in that scenario too, but I just want to put something 34.
Mm-hmm.
In the event of an abortion to a visitor area. So if they answer, well, we close the visitor area until we can remove the doe and the bedding strip. You check close or you check remove?
Say that again, sorry.
So if their answer is, well, we close the visitor area until we can remove the doe and the bedding from that area.
That's,
So they close this.
So, yeah, so number 2 would only be that they're still allowing access while they're running the cleaning.
yes.
So if they restrict access while they do anything, then you could close the area, is the right answer.
Yeah, sorry.
I believe that's correct.
Okay, so if they restrict access while they do any of those other things, close the visitor area.
Any other questions on agritourism? Okay, so just real quickly, biologics, you'll want to complete sampling at the time of visit or arrange for a follow-up if necessary, if it's just taking more time than you had expected. We will cover biologics in detail this afternoon. This is all in your manual as well, just a reminder for after the visit. Package up all of the biologic specimens and send them to the correct laboratories with the prepaid shipping label that is in all of your kits. Make sure you review the questionnaires and verify your NAHMS ID. The eligible questions are not skipped and totals add up correctly. We would appreciate that on our end. And then you'll fill out a few other things on those last pages. And then you guys will be collecting from your field staff the producer agreements, the consent forms, completed questionnaires, etc. Send the completed questionnaires to us. Hold on to the producer agreements and consent forms until we tell you to destroy them. Do not send the consent forms to NAHMS, just as a reminder. With that, I'll take any questions. I know we're running a little behind, so hopefully we can push forward onto our next guest speaker, but I'm happy to take any questions via email or grab me if something comes up. We can discuss it more tomorrow morning as well.